Good morning, welcome to CATEX-TV. My name is Frank Fortunato. This is a live broadcast from Princeton, New Jersey. Today is Tuesday, April 13th, 2010. It's 11:30 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time in the U.S. It's 4:30 p.m. in London. In Mexico City, it's 10:30 a.m. If you need to reach us during the broadcast, you can phone in toll-free at 1-866-67-CATEX. Overseas, our AOL instant mail address is CATEX-TV. President Obama is wrapping up the nuclear disarmament talks in Washington, D.C. He's been holding a series of bilateral meetings with 47 of the world's leaders. Some of them as short as 15 minutes in length. There had been high hopes that his discussion with Chinese President Wu was going to end up with the Chinese announcing at least some flexibility on reevaluating the yuan. About 15 minutes ago, President Wu said no. That any discussion or decision about reevaluating the renminbi would occur only because of domestic Chinese needs. So the beat will go on. We have some economic news later on which adds some interesting sidelight to that. We'll now go to our main news. There's been an air crash in Indonesia. A Boeing 737-300 belonging to Merpati Airlines, as you can see, skidded off a runway, and this is clearly a total hull loss. We have not received any information as to who might be insuring the jet, but as you can see, it is essentially cracked in half. Further aft in the fuselage, the cockpit actually was sheared off as well. So this plane is a total loss. Miraculously, nobody was killed. 100 passengers on board were able to be evacuated. The plane skidded off a runway this morning. About 20 people were actually injured. It occurred at the Rendani Domestic Airport in West Papua in Indonesia. All 103 passengers and 6 crew members are safe. Some are injured. Bad weather, including heavy rain and fog, of course, were suspected of playing a part in the crash, although expert investigators have yet to arrive on the scene. Witnesses said that the left wing broke off as the plane hurtled into trees at the end of the runway. The body of the plane came to rest with the tail section in the river, and the cockpit was almost sheared off. The plane was flying a route of about 340 kilometers from Serang, also in West Papua, to Manokwari. Indonesia has heavy reliance on air transport, but it also has one of Asia's worst air safety records. The U.S. trade deficit rose more than expected in February, as soaring imports of consumer goods and industrial supplies outweighed the impact of falling oil import prices, as well as aggregate oil imports, which fell to their lowest level in 11 years. The U.S. deficit in the international trade of goods and services rose 7.4% to a shade under $40 billion in February. This is up from a revised $36.95 billion the month before. However, despite the overall widening in the trade gap, the U.S. trade deficit with China in February narrowed to its lowest level in nearly a year. Imports grew by 1.7% to $182.8 billion, up from $179.8 billion in January. Exports actually increased a little bit, up to about $143 billion and change. The February deficit was a little higher than the $39 billion shortfall Wall Street was expecting. The stock market's down about 12 points right now. One of the reasons the market might only be down 12 points is because of this. This news is running on the front page of today's Washington Post. It says the federal deficit is running significantly lower than it did last year, and with the budget gap for the first half of fiscal 2010 down about 8% over the same period a year ago. This is according to senior Obama administrations last night. The officials attributed the results to higher tax revenue and lower spending than projected on the financial bailouts. If the trend continues for the rest of the year, it would mean the annual deficit would be about $1.3 trillion, about $300 billion less than the Obama administration's projection just 2 months ago. The officials spoke on condition of anonymity because the findings are preliminary. They expressed cautious optimism about the figures, but noted that the outlook remains uncertain. Officials also want to see whether the favorable trend in tax collections recorded in February and March holds up through the April tax season. The official did identify a number of factors which might figure very well for the continuance of the trend. Taxes paid from corporations and withheld from individual paychecks were up in February and March compared with the same time last year. This uptick reversed 21 months of year-over-year declines and suggested that more Americans are getting back to work or earning higher salaries. So that could be actually amazing news if that begins to attract some traction. Well, in Europe, if you're an investor in Greek bonds, you're probably in danger of getting shut out. Greece's sale of short-term debt met with a huge demand today. Soothing market jitters, investors scooped up the high-yielding paper that, of course, is effectively backed by the EU and the International Monetary Fund. Doesn't get any better than that. EU governments have pledged over the weekend to step in with about 40 billion US in loans if Greece was unable to raise money at a reasonable cost. So investors were really keeping an eye on the auctions for any signs that Athens might have to ask for help. The Greek government's planned sale of 600 million euros of 52-week treasury bonds met with bids reaching 4 billion euros, meaning it was oversubscribed over 6.5 times. An auction of 26-week bills, also seeking 600 million euros, drew bids totaling 4.6 billion euros. That's an oversubscription rate of over 7.5 times. Ultimately, 780 million euros of bills in each auction were sold. The price wasn't that bad, 4.85% for the 52-week bills and 4.55% for the 26-week bills. They're slightly below the rates on existing Greek bills of similar maturity. So, it's actually rather miraculous. Stock market continues to be down a little bit, 10 or 11 points. We'll go to a word from our sponsors and come back with the rest of the news. Well, the words, "Houston, we've got a problem," uttered by Commander Jim Lovell aboard Apollo 13, have entered the English lexicon. And those words were actually uttered 40 years ago today by Commander Lovell. Apollo 13 was 4/5 of the way to the moon when an explosion blew out one of the side panels, causing a immediate dispersal of a significant amount of oxygen on board the craft, forcing the 3 astronauts into the lunar excursion module and, of course, canceling their landing on the lunar surface. It was a touch-and-go situation, as anybody who's ever seen the movie knows, and you should dig up some of the reprinted articles and read it. It was truly an event worth noting. Some other interesting news: Cooper Gay, the London broker, which is now international in size, announced their 2009 revenue. They unveiled tremendous results. Revenue topped £100 million. That was a 29%